Tecnológico de Monterrey para la invitación y mil gracias para la más importante persona en el Algoba, que es el traductor Martín. Martín, allí, you would not want to hear me give this talk in Spanish because no one has that kind of time today. Now, you're all wondering, what are these things up here? Why am I holding these? So I want to talk for a moment about the way that this room symbolizes the way that traditional media works. You're all sitting together. Some of you are checking your Blackberries, some of you are watching, but you're all sitting together and I'm up here. I'm separate from you and I'm giving you a message. That's how traditional media works. Right? Traditional media works. Watch out, pay attention, otherwise you're going to get beamed. Traditional media works because the media sends the message out. The media yes, I'm even throwing it at the grown-ups, don't worry. The media sends the message out and the audience receives the message, right? Now, the question is, how many of you are way ahead of me? What's different about digital media? What's different about digital media? For the first time in human history, all of a sudden, the audience is able to do something other than just receive. Come on, guys, I'm giving you lots of ammunition. What do? Here you are. You've got the message. You're receiving the message. This is traditional media. Come on, someone's going to figure it out one of these days. Aha! You can talk back. Well, go ahead, talk back. Come on. You're all young. You've got strong arms. Oh, you can do better than that. Come on. Here we go. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're looking at digital. Okay. Now, here's the other thing. What I just have shown you, what I'm showing you right now, is that traditional media only allows this. Digital media allows, come on. There we go. But the most important thing about digital media is not the fact that you can talk back to big media, but that you can talk to each other. Now, let's see if you guys can talk to each other with these balls in the next couple of seconds. Come on, throw them at each other. It's like a food fight. You've got some time. This is real media. This is digital media. Throw them. Come on, not at me. Throw them at each other. What happens with digital media is that suddenly you people need to wake up and have some fun. Come on, let's see how many balls can we get in the air right now. Come on, grown-ups, you know what to do. Throw them up in the air. Come on. There we go, there's one. Can you throw? You've got one, can you throw? Tira. Thank you. Mas, come on, come on, come on. Welcome to the internet. That's what the internet is all about. For those of you who don't speak English, now would be a real good time to put the headsets on. So, let me get this thing going. Who am I? Arturo kindly described to you. Can we get the slides up, please? My name is Brad Berens. I'm the head of content for iMedia and the CMO Summits. I'm also an editor-at-large for iMedia Connection, which is a trade publication covering the internet and how the internet and mass communications and marketing all go together. I have a blog. How many of you in the room have blogs? Keep going. How many of you have MySpace pages? How many of you stand up? You got to get your blood going. Stand up if you have a MySpace page. You're going to be working hard for the next hour. Come on. Can you do it? How would you say this in Spanish? Yeah. If you have a Facebook page, a MySpace page, or a blog, stand up. Okay. That's a lot of you. By the time the youngsters in the room graduate from college, it'll be even more of you. Now, if you are curious about the crazy man who's talking up on stage, you can learn much more about me at bradberens.com. The thing to know, you can sit down now. Traditional media works by having a chokehold on distribution. You own the printing press for the newspaper. You own the printing press for the magazines or the books. You own the very expensive equipment and the transmitting towers for radio or television. You own the movie studio that makes the movies, and other people own the theaters. Distribution, up until the birth of the internet, about 15, 16 years ago, in terms of the publicly available internet, distribution was expensive and hard. That's why, this is actually worthwhile. If you're interested in any of the information, all of these slides tomorrow will be at that URL. So don't bother taking notes on numbers. Take notes on things that I say if they're worthwhile. That's the chokehold. That's traditional media and distribution. When you own the printing press, when you own the way of distributing things, then you get to charge a lot of money for it. Suddenly, the internet comes along, and we have infinite distribution, and it's cheap. You have a blog, yes? Do you have a blog? Or a MySpace page? You, yes. What do you have? MySpace? Okay. Anyone in the world can get to those pages for free. Now, you don't have the ability to market your message the way the big media does, but you can get infinite distribution for the cost of an internet connection. So, the title of today's talk is 6 Questions About the Digital Revolution, and maybe some answers. Let's get to them. Number 1, who is online? In the US, where I live, it's just about everybody. If you look at those numbers up there, the US has 72.5% penetration of the internet among the populace. And there's staggering growth. In the year 2000, we had 44%. Today, we have 72.5%. Let's take a look at how people are using the internet in the United States. Some of this data is from the Center for the Digital Future, which is run by Jeffrey Cole. Jeff is the founder of the World Internet Project, which Fernando is going to be doing the Mexican version of here. Now, what are we seeing in the United States? The internet is more pervasive than ever. 76% of online Americans have broadband at home. That's a very big deal. They're subscribers. It was less than 50% just 2 years ago. The average American spends 15 hours online each week. Some of the people I work with spend 15 hours online each day. There's a gain of 1.3 hours from 2006 to 2007. At home, people are spending on average 10 hours online each week. The more experienced you are, the more time you spend. In the US, the average number of years online is 9.3. There are very few people who are new to the internet who are not children. 68% of Americans have their internet always on. They're subscribers, they've got it on, and it is the information resource of first resort. 71% of people in the US go online with no particular destination in mind. And what that means is that the internet has become an entertainment medium and a social medium, in addition to being the de facto information resource for people. Right? People go online to kill time. They go online to read things, to watch things, to listen to things, to talk with each other. That doesn't happen when you have a limited access to the internet, when you're on dial-up, when you don't have a computer in the home, when you don't have a computer with a broadband connection. Then, connecting to the internet is a big deal. But once you have broadband in the home and it's there all the time, then suddenly you're using it all the time. The average number, this is also a remarkable thing, the average number of online friends that you've never met face-to-face in the US, 5.2. Now, let's talk about youngsters. People who are 12 to 24 in the US are never going to own, they're not going to read a newspaper that's printed. In fact, newspapers, you have to remember I talked about that chokehold of distribution? Well, the newspapers are going down quickly all over the world, largely because of a man named Craig Newmark. You have Craigslist here in Mexico. Craig, who's a wonderful guy, who single-handedly destroyed an entire industry, did so by taking the cash cow of the newspapers, which is the classified ads, and putting them online for free. Newspapers are in bad shape. Now, the news business, the information business, is not in bad shape. People like to talk about your generation and say you're not interested in news, you're not interested in politics. That's baloney. You are among the generation that is most engaged with news, but you're not engaged with news on paper. In the US, increasingly, the youngsters are never going to own a landline phone. They're not going to watch television on anybody else's schedule for much longer. They have DVRs. There are exceptions for sporting events and things like American Idol. They trust their peers more than they trust experts. They're willing sort of to pay for content, to pay for music. They're pirating less and paying more. But of course, we're in the middle of a global economic collapse, so that's not going to last very long. They're not as interested in the source of information, but they aggregate lots of different kinds of information. Community, online community, is at the absolute heart of their experience, as is the mobile phone. They use instant messenger, and they think that email is for their parents. As a father, I only have one thing to say about that, which is, ouch. Now, what are they going to keep doing versus what are they going to abandon? It's likely that you youngsters in the room are not going to continue to believe that you're not affected by branding or advertising, that you're not going to trust only your peers for information in the future. You'll probably start emailing. You're not going to be as interested in the details of your friends' lives in such detail for much longer, and you're no longer going to believe that everyone blogs. The things you're going to continue to do forever, you're going to continue to want total control of your media. You're not going to believe that anyone ever read a newspaper. How many of you, stand up if you wear a wristwatch. If you wear a wristwatch, stand up, come on, get the blood going. Now, okay. Now, why don't people wear wristwatches? Why do you need a wristwatch? You've got a mobile phone. The Timex people, the Cartier people, they're all in big trouble. The wristwatch industry is another victim of the internet. You're never going to want to watch television on anyone else's schedule. And again, mobile's everything. If you go to your parents, your older siblings and your parents, they're still reading newspapers and magazines. They like mobile for the voice, but they don't use it for data. This is more true in the US than here. Community is important for tasks, but not for social things. They care greatly about the source of information, and they use email a lot. For the older people, and again, we have a huge penetration in the US of the internet. Here in Mexico, it skews a little bit younger. For the older people, they're going to go online for a reason. A grandchild goes to college or goes into the military. They want to know something about that weird rash that's creeping up their leg. They're going to communicate for specific reasons. They're not going to just hang out online. Advertising and branding is everything for them, and they are also very, very heavy into email. Now, you'll hear me talk about bandwidth a lot, right? The reason that you'll hear me talk about bandwidth is the more bandwidth you have, the more access to the internet you have, and the faster access you have to the internet, the more important the internet becomes. So if you look, the yellow bars there, what you'll see is that I think it's 85% of people who have broadband think that the internet is very important or extremely important. It goes down to the 70s for people who are on a dial-up connection. The more bandwidth you have, the more the internet becomes important for you. Now, how is the internet in Mexico different? First of all, you guys have 23 million people who are online here, rather than 220 million. It's the second largest population of internet users in Latin America. You also have staggering growth of internet penetration, staggering from 2000, where it was 2.7%, to 6% this year. You may disagree with these figures, but this is from a MIPSI. Now compare 21.6% to 72.5% penetration in the US. What's happening right now with your cable companies providing a triple play of television and voice and internet with the extraordinary spread of the internet is that you're going to see in the next few months, the next year, the next 18 months, a transformation of culture here in Mexico, quite akin to the one that we've been wrestling with up in the United States for the last couple of years. Now, if you look here, we have 21.6% penetration for the internet, but that's nothing compared to mobile, right? Mobile has gone from 30%, 29% to 68% from 2003 to 2008. You would think, you'd think that that meant that the people were checking data on their phones. That's actually not the case, and I'll have a slide about that later. Well, you're basically split evenly between men and women who are users. There's a slight edge of male users versus female users, and the reason for that is because men love gadgets, and that's true across the world. When I talked before about how the internet skewed a little bit younger here in Mexico, 70% of internet users here in this country are between the ages of 12 and 34. Penetration among the elder is less and likely to not increase. The only way that older people will start to use the internet more is because you people will start to get older and will keep on using the internet. And look at this number. Now, this is a hard chart to read. It's a little bit blurry, but the big circle there is the average monthly hours per user for the internet is 23.7 hours. Remember, in the United States, it was 15.3 hours per week, so 60 hours per month. What you see is as the internet becomes a daily part of your life, you use it more and more, and it becomes more and more important. That's starting to happen here. That's why this is a very exciting time. Now, here in Mexico, what you're seeing is that less than 25% of internet users are subscribers. A subscriber is someone who has a broadband, and I'm talking about broadband here, a broadband connection in the home. You have a lot more access that's happening, where broadband subscriber penetration is 4%. This is that slide I was talking about. 29% of people in this country have data on their mobile phones, but only 7% actually use it. Now, this is where I thought I was going. Unlike the U.S., where people have, there's a 70% penetration of broadband in the home, here there's 48% broad penetration, up from 43% in 2006, but the vast majority of people are doing a lot with the internet outside of the home, in internet cafes, in the office, at the school. You go to somebody else's house because they have a broadband connection, or just wandering around. What that means is that as access here is limited, it means that the cultural transformations are going to be slower. As access gets broader and wider and deeper, you'll start to see the kinds of changes that happen when the audience is empowered to throw communication at each other as well as back at big media happen a lot faster. So, how much does a fish think about water? And the answer is, the fish only thinks about water when it needs water. That's why I love this picture, by the way. So as bandwidth increases, as the water's there and you can swim around in the digital ocean, you're going to find increasingly that you're going to do a lot more exciting things. So what are people doing online? This is sort of more of a look up at the US, and the fact of the matter is that it changes all the time. You know, we had this little election yesterday in the United States. One of the things that was remarkable about the election is that President-elect Barack Obama, thank you, managed to raise an extraordinary amount of money online. Now that was, John Kerry had done it before, Howard Dean had done it before, but he crowdsourced his fundraising, and people were giving $5 donations, $100 donations. It became a community effort. It became something where people really felt that the campaign belonged to them. It didn't just belong to the fat cats, the rich people, and the political donors. In addition, Saturday Night Live, I don't know if you all watch Saturday Night Live. I don't think people in my country have watched it since the 70s in large numbers until this year. Saturday Night Live is a long-time show, and suddenly, after years of just dying, it's the hottest show on television. Why? Because Tina Fey does a really good impression of Sarah Palin. Now, the interesting thing about the Tina Fey, Sarah Palin impression is that more people saw it online, or they saw it by time shifting their television. They used their TiVo or their DVR to watch it later, then watched it in live broadcast. That is a huge change. And it's an indication of the fact that I can sit here and talk about what people are doing online in the United States, here in Mexico, in Europe, in Asia. I could talk all day. By tomorrow, something's going to change. Our culture is changing faster today. Our culture across the world is changing faster today than it ever has. And the reason is because of digital media. So some broadly changing online behaviors in the US. 21% of users now have a search page as their home page. That's twice the rate as it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. 51% of users said that all search engine results are reliable and accurate. And that seems pretty good. But it's a downturn from 62% the previous year of this study. What that shows is that the clutter that's happening, the fact that there's so much information that's online, is starting to make a real impact on how people view that information. 47% of people immediately go to their email accounts after going online. 10% go to a search engine. That's the number 2 response. Here's a big deal. 27% of users go online wirelessly. That's up 10 times in 5 years. Wireless doesn't just mean mobile. It doesn't mean the mobile phone. It also means wireless home networks. How many of you have a broadband connection at your parents' house? That's a lot of you, okay? When you have a broadband connection at the parents' house, the thing that's more important than the broadband connection itself is the wireless home network. Here, at the Tecnológico de Monterrey, you have a pervasive wireless network. There's one that has been announced for Mexico City, for the historic district, which is going to be a free municipal Wi-Fi. I'll talk about this more later. When you have a wireless home network, when you have the ability to take your computer out of the back room, out of the spare bedroom, out of the study, out of the closet, and move it to the most important room in the house, which is the kitchen. Did you think I was going to say the bathroom? When you move it to the most important room in the house, suddenly what you have is, again, the internet becomes that de facto information source. That is a big change. Now, in the US, what we're seeing is a 400% increase in photo sharing just since 2003. People are not sharing their photos with their school. They're not sharing their photos with big media, although big media wants them to share photos. People are sharing photos with each other. And we'll talk about participatory culture again more. How quickly should you reply to email? Not all changes are good. We're seeing an increase as we zoom in how urgently people regard email to be. There's a big uptick from the previous year in people thinking you've got to respond to email now. You've got to respond to email as soon as you possibly can, right? That, again, is the downside. We have shiny object syndrome. We want the new thing. We want the new gadget. We want to look at the blinking thing. The increased urgency of email is one of the key issues that's changing our culture. Now, we talked about, a bunch of you have Facebook pages and MySpace pages. There's High Five. There's all sorts of social networks. Why are people going to these things? Primarily, they're going to relax or fill time, to seek information about getting together in person, or to do social interaction. So again, as the internet moves out of the back room, as it gets wireless, as it moves into the kitchen, it suddenly becomes more than just a place to find out about your bank balance. Another thing we're seeing a big increase in right now is online community. From, I really can't read that slide. Either I need new glasses or this thing's out of focus. But from 6%, I believe it's to 15% in 2 years, right? So that's still a very small slice of the worldwide population is invested in online community, but that slice is growing by leaps and bounds every year. More significantly, we're seeing an uptick from 42% to 55% in people who think that their online communities are just as important as their offline communities. And I don't mean Facebook, although Facebook's very important for lots of people. I mean if you belong to a community that's invested in a particular activity, in a particular hobby, that those online communities become increasingly important over the course of time. Online participation, participatory culture, online are only going to get more important as we have more and more bandwidth in more and more places across the world. People want to create and share, they want to communicate, they want to socialize, they want to do it with each other. That kind of urge, that desire that people have to contact each other, not simply to be the passive recipients of big media messages, require different sorts of media. So, how do we define participation? Is it a bunch of people singing the same tune in chorus, or is it a food fight? Well, we have lots of the same kinds of participation. And what that means is we're going to be exploring how people participate differently over the course of the next few years. Now, in reality, it's even worse than a food fight. Even an angry mob is unified in its desire to grab pitchforks and go kill the monster. But what we're seeing now is more and more division, more and more fractalization and fragmentation of the cultural and media landscape. When it comes to participatory culture, a lot of people are working on this. These are 5 books. Henry Jenkins' book, Convergence Culture, Howard Rheingold's Virtual Community, Clay Shirky's book, Here Comes Everybody. There's a book about this every day. It's a hugely significant transformation of culture. Now, why are people doing all this? Why are people creating blogs, creating videos, uploading things, sharing things? Why do they spend their time doing it when they could be watching perfectly good television? And the answer is they can. For the first time in human history, you guys can communicate with each other just as easily as the newspaper or the television studio can communicate with you. I mentioned Clay Shirky before, the author of Here Comes Everybody. He's talked quite eloquently about a cognitive surplus. Wikipedia, the entirety of the Wikipedia project, which is the most extensive repository of encyclopedic knowledge ever, a rough back-of-the-envelope calculation said that it took 100 million hours of human thought to create Wikipedia. Does that seem like a lot? 100 million hours of human thought? Well, in the US alone, every year, people can consume 200 million hours of television. So if we just take a few slices of the TV watching, how many Wikipedias are out there? How much can we create? How much are we able to transform the world just by getting up and doing something rather than watching television? And the answer is a whole heck of a lot. Now, I love television. I'm not here to say that television's bad, but 200 million hours every year might just be a little bit much. How is the internet changing the US media landscape? And again, this is a sneak peek, I think, at how it's going to continue to change the landscape here. It's already way ahead of the US in places like Korea and Finland, other parts of Europe. So, this is a painting, and the painting is called Fragmentation. It's by a painter named Michael Raum. And fragmentation is what is happening to the media landscape. We have 2 kinds of fragmentation. We have external fragmentation. That's fragmentation of the actual media. Just last week, the New York Times had a piece about how the sky is falling for employees at a lot of big media brands in the US. The Christian Science Monitor, which has been a newspaper for 100 years, is discontinuing its print publication and going online. There have been layoffs at Time. There's been all sorts of problems. Martha Stewart, living on the media, has cut back its earnings report, and I can't read that, so you'll have to read it online to get the data later. David Carr from the New York Times eloquently said this: the paradox of all of these announcements, the announcements that big media brands are in trouble, is that newspapers and magazines do not have an audience problem. Newspaper websites are a vital source of news and growing, but they do have a consumer problem, which is to say that the offline audience, the print audience, is more economically valuable than the online audience. Even though millions of people are surging online every single day because of a lot of legacy structures of buying and selling media, the New York Times makes thousands of dollars for one print ad, but maybe $20 for an online ad if 1,000 people see it. That's going to change. And a lot of what I do in my work is talking to people about those changes in digital media and how it relates to advertising and marketing. Because remember, advertising powers media. Advertising is the gasoline that drives the media engine, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. So let's talk about movies, because in some ways, you only really see the transformation as you look at things like movies and television up close and impersonal. Now, according to the Motion Picture Association of America, box office in 2007 was great. We had a 5.4% gain to $9.63 billion. Worldwide, the box office at 26.7 billion, which is a 5% increase. Domestic tickets sold in the US held steady at 1.4 billion. So that seems like the movie business is a good business to be in. But it all depends on your baseline. If you take a journey in a time machine back to 1946, what you'll find is then 4.3 billion tickets were sold in the US. in 1946, 4.3 billion tickets. In order to keep pace with population growth, we would have had to have sold 9 billion movie tickets last year in the US in order just to keep pace. Instead, we sold 1.4 billion. Now, 1946 is an important year in the US because that's when television was introduced. Television did a lot to change the movie landscape. So if you look at the first half of this year, now what you'll see is a lot of tickets, there's an increase in tickets sold in 2008. Year-to-date, revenues are up also from 7.570 billion in 2007 to 7.583 billion. That's a nice little piece of growth. Again, this is before the economy took an absolute nosedive, and a lot of television people in the US are very happy right now because they think people are going to spend more time at home. If you look at the estimated movie tickets sold, the #1 movie in the US in 2007 was Spider-Man 3 with almost 50 million tickets. Who saw Spider-Man 3? I thought #2 was better. Who thought #2 was better? 1 was terrible, right? So 3, I thought was good. 50 million tickets, right? If you look down at the Simpsons movie, though, that's the #10 movie, you've got 27 million tickets. And if you scoot down to B movie, which is the #20 movie, you have 18 million tickets. What that means is that between the #1 movie and the #20 movie, there's a 73% drop in tickets sold. If you scoot down to 48, which is a delightful movie called Music and Lyrics, there's an 85% drop from #1. If you scoot down to number 101, which is a very odd movie, I like movies, called Across the Universe, you've got a 92% drop in tickets sold from the #1 movie to the #101 movie, and there were 674 other movies that were released and distributed in 2007. What that means is that there's a very thin upper slice of big hit media. The rest of the media, the rest of it, basically from 11 on down, most of it's not profitable, and most of it's in big trouble. The audience is fragmenting. Everybody sees a very small number of films, and then people migrate to a lot of films that only some people see. The problem is that the media industry across the world is an industrial revolution-driven industry that's based on scale. It's based on that distribution chokehold, and it's based on getting millions of people to see one thing rather than a few people to see a lot of different things. Now, we're going to skip here. Anybody know what the long tail is? The long tail? There is no long tail for theatrical releases. It's just too darned expensive. So let's talk about television. More tales of fragmentation. Again, this is US data, but there's broadly similar data for every country that has mass television in the world. What we see is that in 1977, the #1 show had a 31.5 rating. It went up in the 80s to 34.9, but not that much, not that big a difference. Then things started to happen in the 90s. The #1 show went down from a 31.5 to 21.2. It dropped from 53 million people to 35 million people. And by 2007, the #1 show was down to 17.3. That may not seem like a big difference, but that's for the #1 show in the country. What we're seeing is an incredible erosion of audience over the course of those years. It gets a lot worse if you look at the #5 show. Charlie's Angels, which is a terrible show, had a 25.8 rating in 1977. No real change by 1987, a slight decline, and then a massive decline to 16.6 rating in 97 and down to 12.6. Or if you look at the number of the share, from 38 million to 20 million, and that's just in 20 years. The #20 show, Oy vey smear, oh my heavens, to Murgatroyd, we're going from a 21.8 rating to an 8.8 rating, from a 27 share to a 13 share. And yet, and here's the really interesting thing, even though we're seeing the audiences erode from television shows, overall television watching time is going up. In 1975, the average household watched 6 hours and 18 minutes of television per day. In 2008, we have an uptick to 8 hours and 30 minutes a day. That's 41 minutes per person per day increase between 1991 and 2008. Now here's the real question. Who are these people? Who's watching that much television? Well, what we're going to find out pretty quickly is that they are watching a lot of television, but they're also doing a whole lot of other things. Where are they spending the time? The average number of channels available in the US, this is a very cable-driven television country, which is there's growing cable here, but there's a more pronounced satellite base here in Mexico. 118 channels, which is up from 104. 16 channels are watched. What we're seeing is, again, people are making a consideration set. They're not watching all 118 channels, all 119 channels. They're watching a few channels. They make their choices. I'm the kind of guy who watches this channel. I'm the kind of girl who watches that channel. And then they stick with them. It's very hard to bust into that consideration set and get people to watch another channel. Now, we talked about the fragmentation of media, the external fragmentation. Now I want to talk about a different kind of fragmentation, an internal fragmentation, and that's the fragmentation of attention. We all are watching a whole lot of screens all the time. Some of you are probably checking your BlackBerries as I'm speaking right now. We have a lot of different things competing for our attention. There are 3 different ways that you can talk about this kind of internal fragmentation: multitasking, continuous partial attention, simultaneous media consumption. Multitasking is the things that you're doing at the same time. You're listening to your music while you're typing a paper for school, while you're trading instant messages with your friends, while you're downloading podcasts. Right? Continuous partial attention is how much of your time, how much of your mental bandwidth is engaged by those different activities. And then simultaneous media consumption is from the advertiser and the media person's perspective. Remember I said that advertising is the gasoline that powers the internet engine? Well, the thing is that when somebody buys a television commercial, the commercial that you're ignoring, that you're fast forwarding through if you have TiVo, they are presuming that they're buying your complete attention. And that's just not the case anymore. There's a wonderful book that just came out, which I'm almost done with, which is called iBrain, Surviving the Technological Alteration of the Modern Mind by Gary Small. And Dr. Small is a neurologist and neuroscientist at UCLA, says the brain seems to work better when implementing a single sustained task than when multitasking, despite most people's perceptions that they are doing more and at a faster pace when they multitask. Youngsters are better at multitasking than older people, but in fact, there are so many things competing for our attention, and you don't get as much done when you're doing more things at once. So talking about SIM data, right? Again, advertising powers media. When you watch TV, and this is from big research out of Cincinnati, it's not just the US, they cover all over the world, including Mexico, and what they're seeing is that there's basically roughly 60% of the people either regularly or occasionally are watching TV and going online at the same time. When you talk about it from the TV perspective, when you watch TV, you simultaneously go online, you see 58.4% for men, 60.3% for women. Everybody knows that women are better at multitasking than men. If you look at it from the other perspective, when you go online, do you simultaneously watch TV? And there you see a slight uptick with 60.6% for men and 65% for women. It's not just big research that is doing this. The Center for the Digital Future at Annenberg, and I had some of their data before, has again roughly a 63-66% of people who do multiple activities online. When a television commercial comes on regularly, this is based on the last 2 SIM studies from big research, I really have to look at this one because, all right, 40%, over 40% of people channel surf or change the channel. This young man is asleep in the front row. In fact, oh, hello, good morning. 35% or so talk with others in the room or on the phone. 30% mentally tune out. A whopping 5% of people who are watching television, 5% of people actually watch the television commercial. What's going to change is a lot of the media that you guys get for free, the soccer games, the soap operas, the Disney Channel, whatever it is, the stuff that you get for free, well, you get it for free because advertisers are paying to tell you about their antiperspirant, about the soft drink, about the movie, about what it is. The deal is getting worse all the time for advertisers, and that means that the media that you guys rely on, the big media, is going to be in some big jeopardy. On the other hand, why shouldn't you control your media? Increasingly, people are controlling their media. Magna Research is predicting that by 2012, again, I'm having some trouble with this, 23% of people are going to be controlling their television watching through digital video recorders. That's a huge uptick from where it is right now. The ability of people to avoid ads, to time shift things, to do things on their schedule, to see what they want, where they want it, when they want it, and how they want it, is only going to increase. Again, it increases as bandwidth increases, and bandwidth increases what's happening right now in Mexico. In a fragmented and cluttered media landscape, finding a larger audience will only get harder, and it will get harder and harder, as I said just a moment ago, to make media profitable. Now, the internet is the greatest thing to happen to the human species since the telephone. It's way more important than television. Right? It's more important than many things. It's up there with the Gutenberg Bible because it takes information that used to be held by some people and it disseminates it to everybody. But it's not good for business. So what we're seeing is a global shift in how information is propagated to the population. And that's only going to get more and more urgent. Talked about advertising. I work for a bunch of companies. One of them is called AdTech, the other is called iMedia. We track advertising spend. The Interactive Advertising Bureau, the IAB here in Mexico, which I'm sure you're working with, they track this as well across the world. And what we've seen is since the beginning of the internet in the late 90s until now, the spend is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because advertisers who see that the deal for TV advertising, the deal for newspaper advertising, the deal for radio and magazine advertising is getting worse all the time, but it's a pretty good deal to advertise online. Now, in the US, even though media attention to the internet may be up there with 40 to 50%, the advertising spend is still about 7.6%, anywhere between 7.6 and 15%. It's still getting bigger every year, but there's a huge imbalance between how the money that supports media is supporting media online, where the people of this generation are increasingly spending their time. Again, this is US data from eMarketer, who are a company that is remarkable and very generous with their data. If you look at the 3-year change, which is this column here, this is the amount of money coming into digital media in order to make it something that you can have for free. You're seeing double-digit growth across the board, unbelievable growth in video ad spending, because video ads online look like television, so advertisers are very comfortable with them. And then a huge uptick in mobile. That doesn't mean that mobile advertising is actually going to get all that much bigger. It just means that it started from zero, and people are finally starting to spend some money on it. Because of the election and the Olympics in the US, because of the Olympics in China and the US election, the media landscape has been very, very good up until the financial collapse this year. There was 28.5% growth. They're expecting it to slow down and have 12% growth in 2011. These numbers, however, were before a lot of banks started collapsing and a lot of people started spending less money. So, where are people using the internet? I talked about this before. It started in the back room. It's moved to the kitchen. And then increasingly, what's happening is the internet is becoming something that is accessible everywhere. As broadband proliferates, first it's going to proliferate by having more homes wired, having more homes with high-speed connections through cable, more homes with high-speed connection through DSL. But then it's going to spread even more. You're going to see increasingly more and more mobile data. Remember that slide way back? 29% of people in Mexico have mobile data. Only 7% use it. That's going to change. And it's particularly going to change as people have ubiquitous free Wi-Fi, just like you do on this campus. So here are some things to look forward to, the changes that are going to keep on happening. The last 10 feet is how do you get all of that stuff that you're enjoying on your computer onto the big screen in the living room. People still like to sit on the couch and watch video, but many people would like to watch that video that they saw on YouTube, on Dailymotion, wherever it is, on the big screen. This is going to be increasingly significant. How do you get that stuff from the computer in the back room, from the laptop in your lap, onto the big room? In the internet bubble in the 2000, 2001, the big challenge was the last mile, getting goods from a store to someone's home. That didn't work. It's impossible, except in very densely compact urban areas like Mexico City or New York City. What we're going to see increasingly is the last 10 feet, getting content from appliance to appliance. And the reason we're going to see it is that increasingly the 12 to 24 demographic is going to demand it. Mobile, 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 as I said. Everyone increasingly is, among the younger set, are seeing the world through the lens of their mobile phones. Now, how they're doing it is going to change also, and I'll talk about that in a moment. RFID. Does anyone know what RFID means? No? Say it. Radio frequency identification. An RFID chip is about the size of a grain of rice. And Walmart has been trying for years, with dubious success, to have every single piece of inventory that is sold at a Walmart tagged with an RFID chip. RFID plus GPS, satellites that tell you where things are, plus the municipal Wi-Fi that I mentioned before, and plus more mobile, means that the internet, which used to be something separate, right? It used to be that you would go online and it was like going into a fantasy world, like going into the land of Narnia or something like that, where it didn't have any relationship. The geography of the internet and the geography of your town didn't have any bearing on each other. The combination of RFID, GPS, municipal Wi-Fi, fee-based Wi-Fi, and mobile phones mean that we're going to have a ubiquitous computing environment, just like you have right here on this campus. The internet is everywhere on this campus. It changes behavior. That book I talked about before, iBrain, the neurological pathways in your head can change because of using digital technology in 5 hours. If you take someone who is a digital immigrant, someone who's never used the internet, and you have them practice for 1 hour a day for 5 days, you stick them in an MRI machine at the beginning, you stick them back in the machine at the end, different parts of their brain are going to light up. There's a brain gap, according to Dr. Small, between people who are old, like me, and people who are young, like you. It's not just that you're growing up in a different world, it's that your brains work differently. It's almost like we're different species. That is a very big deal. The changes that we're seeing are only going to accelerate, and that's why things like the World Internet Project are absolutely crucial. We also have a ubiquitous media environment. That, again, is a big deal. Increasingly, people, when you're sitting here in classes, you'll be able to watch YouTube quietly and hopefully politely, but you'll be able to take your attention and direct it where you want to go. As the internet spreads, I'm talking about mobile again, as the internet spreads, it transforms static media and even places into richly dynamic and interactive environments. What does that mean? Well, in Asia, there are these things called QR codes. You have, everybody in this room, I'm guessing, has a mobile phone or is pestering mom and dad for a mobile phone right now. In Asia and parts of Europe, there is a software package that sits on the phone and attaches to the phone's camera. You take a picture of one of those codes with your camera, and the phone then sucks information down out from the internet onto the phone. Now, this just happens to be the nutritional information for a Big Mac, which is to say there's not much information because there's not a lot of nutrition in a Big Mac. But imagine if you see an album, if you see a movie you want to see, and instead of those little tiny things at the bottom of the poster, the QR code hooks up to your phone and it says, well, there are 2 tickets to this movie show, and it's starting in 35 minutes and it's 2 blocks away. Would you like us to hold the seats for you? Suddenly the internet of place, the internet of things, is growing and will continue to grow. The US is not even a third world country when it comes to its mobile phones, so you have to look at places like Korea, Japan, and Finland to see what's coming. Now, what we do have, the new G phone, the G1, the Google phone, what they've created, there's a Compare Everywhere application. This phone is going on sale in the US this week. This Compare Everywhere application is similar to the QR codes in that you take the phone and you swipe the barcode and you can figure out if you're being charged a fair price for something. Suddenly, comparison shopping is not something that's only going to happen at home or where you're near a computer. If you see a blouse if you see a DVD and you go, I think I want to buy that DVD. Well, now you take out your G phone, you swipe the barcode, and you find out that the place down the street's got it for $2 less. Or that the store you're in is the best deal in town. That means that merchants, people running stores, are suddenly going to be at a huge disadvantage. In the past, they had all the information about what they paid, about what something cost. And people could scurry out to the public library, they could scurry to their home computer and do it. But that takes time, and sometimes you just want the damn DVD. So you don't have time to do that. Well, now you increasingly have the ability to access a universe of information that used to be chokeholded by media companies, by retailers, by manufacturers, by distributors. The democratization of data, the democratization of information and media access is transforming this world faster than anything else. Now, with this, with QR codes and with the G1 barcode apps, consumers, customers, you are pulling information down. And you have access to that information even in a store. I want those Nikes, but I'm going to buy them down the street, or I'm going to order them online because I can save money that way. But increasingly, you can also push information out. So Boing Boing is a wonderful blog in the US. David Peskowitz is one of their bloggers. And he talks about digital graffiti. Because of mobile phones and because of the increasing ubiquity of mobile data plans, you can tag locations with invisible digital information. Go to a restaurant, you don't like the soup, you can tag it. And you can say, don't order the carrot soup. Go to a restaurant and the waitress is rude, you can tag it. Go to a store and find out that the prices are terrible, tag the store. Don't go in here, go down the street. You know what? The store can't do anything about it because it's our internet. It's not their internet. You're going to be able to publish information in real time, in real place, very easily and increasingly. The Sony Bravia is a new television. It's been out for a couple of years. I think you have them here. And it comes with a plug in the back that hooks up to the internet. So for the first time, a TV can get things from YouTube, can get all sorts of information from online. So that kludgy last 10 feet that I was talking about before, not as big a deal. But there aren't that many of them. But there's also the Chumby. The Chumby is less than $200. It's a cute little thing, about this big. I have one on my nightstand at home. It plugs into the wall, so it's not mobile. It is wireless because it hooks up to the wireless connection in my house, and it shows all sorts of cool stuff. It's my alarm clock. It has different headlines from news. It tells me what the weather is. I can scan it. My 7-year-old daughter won't keep her hands off of it, so I may just give it to her. I'm waiting for Martine to catch up so you will laugh. Okay, it wasn't that funny. The Chumby is the first, not the first, but it's among a series of increasingly cheap and exciting digital appliances that are going to bring the plasticity of information out of the computer, out of the mobile phone, and into other places in the house. I am predicting here that you don't ever need to buy a new smart refrigerator. People keep on talking about that every few years. You're going to buy a smart fridge that's going to tell you when to go buy milk. Well, who wants to, first of all, I don't want my fridge to talk to me that much. Second of all, why should I buy that kind of an appliance? Tesco or Kroger or Walmart should give away for free a RFID reader about the size of a grapefruit. That would then sit, they should give me one for my fridge. Hopefully it will sustain, it won't get too cold and stop working. They should give me one for the pantry. Remember those RFID rice grain sized things I was talking about? If you take the milk out and you don't put it back in, that's when the reader that's going to sit in your refrigerator should send you an email. Why should Walmart do this? Because Walmart can also send you a coupon. Save 20 whatever off of your milk. You know, you take out the cereal and you don't put it back. Hey, you need more Rice Krispies. Or, you know, Rice Krispies, they aren't so good for you. You've told us that you're on a diet. Why not have this whole grain cereal? By doing that, Walmart will more effectively bond itself to you. You will become a more loyal customer because it's easier to let them do the heavy lifting. That's how the digital transformation is going to spread outside of the computer, outside of the laptop, outside of the phone, into the pantry where you keep your food. This LiveScribe just got one of the breakthrough awards from Popular Mechanics, which is a fairly well-respected magazine in the US. For all of you who are students, check out livescribe.com. You get a special pen. It comes with an MP3 recorder that will will record the lecture or the lesson or whatever it is, and it will sync it up. So you take your notes on digital paper with this thing recording. When you're reviewing your notes later on, you're like, what was that madman who was from America saying at that point when I wrote this down? Well, you press a button on the special digital paper, and all of a sudden, you hear the part of the talk because you recorded it. More importantly, those digital notes that you have, I live and die on little index cards. My house is filled with things like this, and I lose them, and then I get grumpy. Well, with LiveScribe, all of the notes that you take are going to be digitized. They get sucked into your computer, and we're losing the screen. They get digitized, they're sucked into your computer, and then you have a searchable archive later on. Now, who knows what that thing on the left is? What's the thing on the left? What is it? The Wii? Who's played with the Wii? By the way, in English, Wii has a certain dirty connotation, so I always feel guilty about saying we up here. I lost my screen. I don't know if somebody can bring it back for me. The Wii, again, is a different kind of controller. Suddenly, your interface with the game is not a keyboard, it's not a joystick, it's a thing you can move around the room as you play. On the right is a picture from an expo back in February. This is a headset that the young lady is wearing, and with her mind, she can move the cursor. Just by thinking about it, she can move the characters while she's playing a video game. The ability to do things with something other than two big thumbs if you have a BlackBerry, the ability to change how you interact with digital information is going to spread also. So your whole body is eventually going to be a mouse. Jaiwire is a company that's turning all sorts of places into wireless hubs, from bars to coffee shops. And I'm wrapping up here, and I want to talk about context. Because one of the things that's different, let me just turn this off for a second. It used to be that I would put things somewhere, and then I would go and get them. Now, I'm messy. You know, I have a very, very low, high clutter threshold, and my wife doesn't like that. As more and more things happen, I'm bringing the slides back, so don't take them away. As more and more things occur, as people get more and more stuff, it becomes increasingly hard to find things. As there's more and more information in the world, it becomes increasingly hard to keep track of that information. So Donald Norman, who wrote this wonderful book called The Design of Everyday Things, talked about how we store information in the world. Information is in the world. Much of the information a person needs to do a task can reside in the world. Behavior is determined by combining the information in memory, in the head, with that in the world. You don't need to know that, well, I don't know if it's the case here, but in the US, that A, B, and C are the letters on the number 2 key of the phone, right? We've got letters on the phone. Do you have that here as well? Is it? But, you know, you have that. Oh, good. Vigorous nodding. Thank you. You don't need to know that ABC is on the 2 key. Why? Because you have your phone with you, right? You know where to find the information, so you store information in the world. Well, the problem with digital information is that it changes all the time. Every time the Wall Street Journal changes its website, I am very unproductive for a day because I have to find things. Here, now, how many of you have an iGoogle page or a home page that you've customized? MySpace, iGoogle, NetVibes, whatever it is. So here's my iGoogle page a month ago. It's hard to read. Then, a week ago, it went from looking like this to looking like this. They took the navigation from the top and they put it on the side. They suddenly took all sorts of stuff that didn't have pictures and they put pictures in it. Well, you know what? It's not actually my iGoogle page. It's Google's iGoogle page, which they let me use. But what that means is that information just starts moving around and you can't find anything and you get depressed, or at least I get depressed, right? So again, context, the context of information, the context of how you are finding things and where you're finding things is getting more and more complicated. You, in this audience, are going to spend more time saying, where was that over the course of your lives than the people who were in the generations before you. Now, we've done who, what, where, how, and why. The last question that I want to talk about today, of the 6 questions that are powering the digital revolution, is when. And when is the hardest question of them all. Right now, those of you who are actually paying attention to what I'm saying, we're engaged in a dynamic. It's called looping. We see each other. You guys see that I'm losing my train of thought or not. I see that someone's falling asleep. Oh, he woke up now. Those things happen when you're face-to-face in front of somebody else. They don't happen when you're by yourself. But increasingly, the downside of on-demand media, the downside of having everything when you want it, where you want it, how you want it, why you want it, in the place you want it, on the appliance you want it, is that you're watching things by yourself. So I want to talk about this movie, The Sixth Sense, when audiences take over. Because other people, this is really probably the most important thing I can really say to you today, so please do pay attention. Other people change how you experience things. When you're watching a comedy, either on television or in the movie theater or on a DVD if you're by yourself and you're watching a comedy, you're probably not going to laugh out loud. But if you're watching it with somebody else, you're probably going to laugh out loud because you represent your row. Similarly, if there's a scary movie or a movie that makes you uncomfortable and you're watching it on DVD or on your TiVo or you're watching it in a movie theater and you're the only one there, if it's something that you're uncomfortable with, you're going to stop watching it. There was a movie last year called Children of Men. I never would have made it through that movie if I hadn't been sitting next to my father, who's the other big chicken in the universe, right? Never would have made it through that movie if I hadn't been sitting with my dad in a movie theater. I hated that movie. By the end of it, it was okay. But it was a very painful experience. Well, my dad and everybody else in the theater had an inhibiting response. You laugh louder, you cry more, and you don't move in the scary parts, right? Guys have figured this out about horror movies for years. That's why guys take girls to horror movies, because they don't leave and they have to grab something and hopefully it's going to be the guy. So I want to talk about The Sixth Sense, right? Now when I saw The Sixth Sense, and some of you might not have been born when I saw The Sixth Sense, we saw it in Universal City, which is in Los Angeles, right next to Universal Studios. And The Sixth Sense, which now everybody who's seen it, they know it's a trick ending, it's really spooky, I see dead people. It's become a cliche, okay? But back then, it was a brand new movie. And the context in which the audience was seeing it, we didn't know what it was about. We didn't know. So here I am with my wife. we could see movies then because we didn't have children. And we're watching it, and the other movie that had come out recently, the thing that had changed horror movies at that point, was a movie called Scream, which was very funny and a little spooky. Well, in the audience, there were a big group of people who thought that The Sixth Sense was going to be Scream. And in fact, they wanted it to be Scream. So even though it's inconceivable now, they were laughing inappropriately, they were making fun of it, they were trying to turn the movie into what they expected. One guy had a laser pointer, and he's like drawing pictures on the screen. And then, this is what became interesting. Over the course of the movie, the dialogue, the dynamic between the audience and the movie became more complex. We realized as a group that this was not Scream. This was not a funny movie. This was, in fact, an intense and scary movie. Halfway through the movie, there was no more laughter. By the end of the movie, we were all sitting there leaning forward together. We had an evolving relationship with the movie. The reason I'm telling you this story is that that only happened because we were there at the same place and the same time. When you are with people together, and you're representing your row, when you're sharing it, when you're looping, you have a different neurological, neuroscientific, cognitive experience than when you're doing it by yourself. As all of you go out into the world and start spending more and more time with media, pay attention to when you're by yourself and when you're with others. Pay attention to how your interactions change. That Gary Small book talks about how there are people who are virtually autistic because they spend so much time by themselves dealing with media. In America, in the US, we have two books. One's called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, and then later a sequel called Better Together, which talks about this as a society-wide problem. And Daniel Goleman's book, Social Intelligence, talks about looping, right? If you were to suddenly fall over and have trouble breathing, and you were to say, oh my God, I think it's anthrax, then within seconds, you would probably start to have trouble breathing, even though it isn't anthrax. Why? Because fear is contagious. Laughter is contagious. You know, this is why crowds do things differently than individuals do. There's an almond-sized piece of your brain called the amygdala. It's right in the middle of your brain. That's what drives emotional contagion. But you need to have other people in order to catch someone's emotion, whether it's in real time or in the real place. Looping, which again is what we're doing together as a group right now, requires the presence of other people. So I urge you as you're thinking about it, because that's something the internet is bad at, right? There's instant messaging, there's VoIP, but if I'm watching a video on YouTube, you're not watching it with me. If I'm watching a video on Dailymotion, you're not watching it with me. The whole podcast industry is based on the idea that people are jogging by themselves, they're in their cars, and they're not interacting with each other. The name iPod makes it sound like you've got people who are tied up in sacks. So pay attention to what's happening, and pay attention to when you're doing media experiences, cultural experiences in the presence of others. Online, as I said, we have instant messenger and chat. We have VoIP and video conferencing, virtual worlds like Gaia or Second Life. Allegedly, we have synchronized video streams with companies like Kite and Juiced. And the most exciting way that people can share media experiences on demand with each other is Xbox. If you have an Xbox and you have Xbox Live, I could play a video game with any one of you in the room, so long as we both have Xbox and an internet connection. So there is hope. Two final thoughts. The first is that the publicly available internet in Mexico is now 16 years old. So the internet is a teenager. Welcome to adolescence. Why is this important? It's important because teenagers are not children, but they're not adults. They have the ability to do things that their parents and grandparents never thought would be possible. And we also don't know where they're going to go. And teenagers tend to be moody. They tend to still be figuring out their limits and figure out what they're doing for themselves. So the internet is a teenager. It's still figuring out what it wants to be, and it's going to continue that for a while. And lastly, this is a very smart man who never lived to see the internet, but he understood the potential. This is Albert Einstein, of course, and he said, computers are incredibly fast, accurate, and stupid. Human beings are incredibly slow, inaccurate, and brilliant. Together, they are powerful beyond imagination. Thank you for your attention. So, I'll need some help if there are questions.
Yeah, don't worry.
So.
Hola, pues iniciamos también una serie de preguntas y respuestas. Si alguno de ustedes tiene una pregunta, la puede hacer en español y se la traducimos a Brad. Por favor, levanten la mano para que nuestro apoyo de staff pueda acercarles el micrófono. ¿Alguna pregunta?
Thank you.
You were telling us that we have this young people being advertising blind, and every time that the younger generation is crawling the internet using a lot of services, but actually we don't see the ads. We're blind. But what media is doing is that you're trying to bring this new ads that are more congruent with the internet, other than the regular media. Mm-hmm. But still, maybe it's not going to happen because two things are going in different ways. Do you see a convergence in the future with advertising and what people is looking in the internet, or do you see new business models that are not based in advertising?
Well, I think the answer to that is yes. I see both. interruptive advertising, these are online, you have banners and buttons, that's called display advertising. So on the top of a page you've got a banner and then one down here. With video ads you have pre-roll or interstitial ads that interrupt the stream. You have text ads. Google's whole $100 billion market cap is based on those little ads on the sponsored listings that you see. There's all sorts of new models. Advertisers tend to think in very limited ways. They think if you're not listening to me when I talk like this, then I should probably talk louder. And so so you've got an arms race between the audience, the citizen, the consumer, as marketers tend to call them, which is a phrase I don't like at all, and the advertisers themselves. So advertisers create increasingly interruptive forms of advertising. What they do is they create a piece of what's called floating creative. So when you load a web page, suddenly this thing scampers across your screen. It's really distracting, and then it settles into something else. They have expandable ads. If you make the mistake of mousing over one, suddenly this thing starts yelling at you. That's the arms race, right? And that's happening all over. If you look at the quality of television 30-second spots, it's going up because they have to grab your attention in the first split second. Otherwise, you're going to hit that fast forward button. On the other hand, we also see an increase in what's called branded entertainment, when there's not going to be a separation between the content that you want to see and the advertising. Instead, the the brand is going to be integrated with the content, either through a pervasive banner at the bottom, through product placement, through all sorts of things. There are a lot of people spending a lot of money trying to figure out different ways of doing this. The reason that search is so powerful, and search is probably 50% of the online advertising income, is because when you're searching for something, you've given Google or Yahoo or MSN or Ask a hint of what you're looking for. And so when they serve up those results, they're already relevant, and therefore you're more likely to engage with them. So I don't know if this answers your question, but your initial presumption, which is that kids today don't pay attention. What the data I was saying actually is something different. Kids today think that they're not affected by advertising, but in fact they're wrong. They are affected by it. They just aren't affected by it in the same ways. There's banner blindness, there's search results blindness. There's lots of studies about this, but for the most part, ConAgra, Anheuser-Busch, these people, they would, the Disney company, they would not advertise if they didn't see some lift in engagement with or sales when they do. The problem is that they'll put out 1 billion ads in order to get maybe a few thousand pieces of engagement, and that's just polluting the digital environment in ways that are really ugly. So, is that an answer? All right. Somebody over here this gentleman.
Hello, hello. Hi, thank you very much. You spoke about bandwidth as a very important key to success on media on future. Can you speak a little about how much increase on bandwidth there's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? And what's the average price of bandwidth on first world countries right now? Just in order to know, to compare a little, how much you pay for a bandwidth connection in the United States, how much bandwidth you get for download and upload, because here's different, right, what you get.
Yeah, downloading and uploading are different.
Right.
Prices are much cheaper in the US than they are here, but they're even cheaper in Greenland. They're cheaper in parts of Europe, and they're more expensive. That's actually for the World Internet Project. There's a wonderful site called Internet World Stats, which I quoted some things for. But in general, what I can say is the culture creation by ordinary folks, as opposed to big media companies, depends on the pervasiveness of bandwidth. It also depends on the ever-increasing upstream. Right? Downstream, when you download something, it's much faster than when you try to push something up into the internet. Fios in the US and AT&T's project Lightspeed, which is now called Uverse. Lightspeed was supposed to be 50 megabits synchronous. That means that you'd be able to upload something at 50 megabits as well as download something at 50 megabits. I have not been able to get AT&T to confirm that this is true. I keep asking. They don't return my phone calls. I get very irritable. But when you have the growth of upstream speed, suddenly you have the democratization of media that on a triple espresso. On average, it's like 50 megabits down and maybe 10 up. Okay, I mean, I'm just pulling that out of nowhere. But the downstream speed dwarfs the upstream speed. Now, we have a very big problem in the US, which is that a lot of powerful people like AT&T and Verizon and Time Warner are trying to make it so that they can control who gets faster downloads. So if it's their stuff, if it's Time Warner and it's one of their videos, they want it, it's going to go right into your computer in lickety-split with no waiting. But if it's from Disney or a competitor, well, then it's going to be slower. So there's a huge fight in the US for something called net neutrality. And the single greatest thing to happen to support the cause of net neutrality happened yesterday when Barack Obama was elected president. So this is a moving target. In general, what I can tell you is that if you have any power or influence, you should fight for more people to have broadband everywhere they possibly can, whether it's wireless or wide, and for the ever-increasing speed of broadband so that the pipes get bigger all over the world.
We are going to get maybe twice the actual bandwidth in the next 5 years, for example?
Here?
No, overall in the world.
Overall, I think that, yeah, I would say that I can't put a number on it. I think that the bandwidth is going to increase, but whether or not that has an actual change in the experience is up for grabs, because as bandwidth increases, so do the size of the things that people are stuffing down the pipes. As the pipes get bigger, so do the applications. As there's more bandwidth, people start sending more and more things. That's why BitTorrent exists, which is a very bandwidth light way of transmitting movies. So I can't make a prediction about it. I know that the pipes are going to get bigger. I don't know if it's going to seem much faster. So I hope so.
Thank you.
Hello. I have two questions for you.
Yes.
What do you think about the global economic crisis?
Say that again, please.
What do you think about the global economic crisis? How that affect the internet industry? That's the number one. And the number two, do you think that the cloud computing and virtual worlds really going to be the next step in internet?
Virtual worlds, is that the second thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, virtual world like Second Life and something like that.
Okay, so he's asked two very simple and easy questions: the global financial collapse and virtual worlds. Right now, remember I said that advertising is the gasoline that powers media. We're having a lot of marketing brands pull back their money and spend less. With the banking industry in the US, for example, we have brands like Wachovia that just disappear. So that's a lot of marketing dollars that are getting taken off the table. So people are spending less. People are freaked out, and when people freak out, they tend to become conservative, so they're spending less, or they're moving their money towards more traditional channels, even though those channels are not necessarily working, things like print and television. So yes, the digital media is suddenly looking around and figuring out that there are fewer dollars. That's why ad networks, for those of you who aren't in digital advertising, you can go to Yahoo and buy your ad from them, but you can also go to a place that buys a lot of different spaces to put ads from a lot of different websites and increase what's called the reach of your advertisement, right? Advertising is based on reach and frequency. Reach. How far does it go? How many websites, how many television stations, how many print publications? How far does this advertisement go? How many? And then frequency is not only how far is it, but how many times do people see it? Because there are studies that say that you need to see an ad like 3 times before you decide to buy that brand of orange juice. We have ad networks that are dropping like flies all over the world. They're either being absorbed, and these are successful, powerful, real companies as well as startups. Ad networks are dropping. Websites, which we call publishers in my industry, websites are suddenly freaking out because the money's drying up. And the startup community, the community of new companies that are doing innovative and exciting things, that is really, really just going on a very, very severe diet. And so there's a huge impact. This is something that my colleagues at AdTech are talking about today. I ran the iMedia Financial Marketing Summit 2 weeks ago in New York. It was a perennial topic. If you drive around New York, you look at the number of banks and you see how many of those branches are going to collapse. The global financial crisis is being ridden on the streets of New York as well as in the rest of the world. So the answer is, yeah, we haven't even begun to see it. a month from now, when the election is no longer a factor, when those political advertisements have been taken off the table, you're going to see a lot of websites and media companies that are hurting in a big way. But remember, what I talked about before, the internet is good for the species. The internet is good for people. It's bad for business, but these multi-billion-dollar conglomerates, they'll survive. Second question, you asked about virtual worlds. Virtual worlds like Second Life or There or Gaia or Club Penguin or even Webkins, and there's all sorts of them all over the place. Yeah, right now, they're not a big deal. They're not a scale. The reason they're exciting is because they're a place where there is presence, where people can be with each other in real time. So Gaia Online, for example, Warner Brothers has done a deal with them where they have movie screenings in-world. You and all of your little friends, you all sit in front of your computers, and you then watch the back of the head of your avatar, your little replacement, as all of the backs of the heads go and they watch a movie screen together on the computer. It's a little weird, right? It seems odd. Yet what it is it's a way for community, for looping, for bonding to happen. I don't think that virtual worlds today are a significant thing in terms of the scale or the media opportunity. But I think that 10 years from now, maybe less, maybe more, that as we break free from the keyboard, break free from the monitor, break free from the mouse, it's going to start to look more like the Matrix, though not as creepy, where you're going to have gloves and glasses, and maybe you'll have a special pair of shoes, or maybe all of your shoes will just have little RFID chips on them. And so you will be the interface. Right? You'll be able to have a room. There's actually an interesting new company that has a room where it captures the body of the person and turns them into an avatar in real time. This seems like crazy science fiction because it is crazy science fiction, but it won't be for long. Last night, as I was watching the election returns, my wife was watching them also in Los Angeles. I had my laptop in my lap. She had hers in her lap. The children were watching, and then they went to play because, you know, it's just not that interesting when you're 7 and 3. And we were trading instant messages together. I've been married for 13 years. My wife and I have been together for 16 years. We got together right when the internet kind of started happening. The first election returns that we watched together on a couch in my apartment in Berkeley, California, where I was teaching at the time. The idea that I could be sitting on the 40th floor of a hotel watching CNN, and that she would be sitting on the couch in Los Angeles, California watching CNN, and that we would type messages to each other is today entirely commonplace. But 13 years ago, 15 years ago, would have been inconceivable. Virtual worlds are where we're going to be. I don't think we'll be there for the next election, but for the one after that, I think we're going to be seeing more surround sound 360-degree 3D interfaces where you're going to have that ability to interact with people in real time, but separated by continents and then eventually by planets. That, for people working at institutes like this, it's very exciting because it means the whole world of scholarship and distance learning is really just beginning to unfold in front of us.
Una última pregunta por acá atrás, por favor. Last question.
Last question?
Sí, oye. In Mexico, we need education before the advertising and entertainment. Mm-hmm. And which is the solution about this?
I don't think I understand the question.
Sí, en México necesitamos primero educación para la gente popular que entretenimiento en el Internet.
In Mexico, we need education beforehand for the majority of the population. And entertainment comes afterwards.
You mean education about the internet or in general?
Sí, no, in Internet, how the Internet can help to do this.
Right. Well, okay, see, here's the thing. If you use words like education and learning about something, most people start to fall asleep. Okay, entertainment is the carrot that you get them to do more things with, right? Utility, convenience, entertainment. You're going to check your bank balance online, and most of the people in Mexico who have internet access check their bank balances online. You're going to do it online because it's easier, right? You're going to use email because you can communicate with someone, you can trade jokes with someone, right? It has to be useful before, or fun before people are going to adopt it in any way. So that's the first thing. The second thing is remember that it skews young. Internet usage skews young here in Mexico. People, it's part of the human condition. People die. Other people are born. So eventually this problem will take care of itself. The people in this room and in this campus are among that very thin upper slice of internet aristocrats who have chronic access. 75% of the people in this country don't have internet access in any regular way. That is the biggest. There are several digital divides, right? There's the digital divide between people who are online and who are offline. There's the digital divide between people who have crappy dial-up access and people who have streaming, high-fidelity, wireless broadband access. And then there's the digital divide between the digital immigrants like myself, which I think the director has talked about at the beginning, and then the digital natives, which are most of the people wearing jumpsuits in this room. So in terms of where Mexico should focus its energy, focus it on getting computers in people's homes with broadband. Let the kids teach the older people what it's all about. Let the older people figure out that they can manage their lives more easily. I'm about to fall off the stage. That they can manage their lives more easily and let nature take its course. I don't know if this answers your question, but it's the best I can do. Right. That's a policy thing. I mean, yes, poor people in every country in the world need to have more regular access, not only to the internet, but to computers. Otherwise, they won't be competitive in the increasingly global marketplace. I agree with you. And it's certainly something that I think is happening here in Mexico. I think it's happening a little more slowly than it's happened in the US, but it's happening and you're making progress. The pervasive growth of cable 3-play is something that you should do. But yeah, everything you can do to make it cheaper for people is something you should be doing because that's going to change the world for everybody. There's a lot of really smart people who are underemployed in this country. If they had broadband connections and decent computers, they could be making more money by helping people in other countries do things than they can by working some job that is not digital. That's not true for everybody, but for a lot of people. JetBlue is an airline in the US that has crowdsourced all of its bookings. So housewives, mostly Mormon in Salt Lake City, but housewives have shifts where they answer their phone and they do all of the booking. They don't have a call center for JetBlue. It's mom, right? And when the kids are at school or after they're in bed, mom's making some extra money by taking care of all of the telephone bookings. How can JetBlue do that? Because of voice over internet protocol telephone lines, because of cheap broadband access. It saves the company money and it puts money into needy communities all over the US. That's what we need to do across the world. I'm hoping that it'll happen here, but that's what this gentleman who's running the World Internet Project is for, and he's much more of an authority on that than I am. Thank you very much.
Queremos agradecer a Brad por haber estado con nosotros. Thank you, Brad, for being here with us.